Admiral Park Do-won stood in his dress uniform on the morning of what should have been the happiest day of his life. His daughter Soyeon was getting married. The ceremony would begin in 3 hours, and guests were already arriving at the garden venue in Seoul. He checked his watch and smiled. Everything was perfect. Then his communication device buzzed with an emergency signal. The message came from New Seoul Colony, 17 light-years away. The colony was home to 4 million people, mostly families who had left Earth seeking new opportunities among the stars. The transmission lasted only 12 seconds. A woman's voice, screaming about fire in the sky, ships appearing from nowhere. Then Static Bark-Doan never made it to his daughter's wedding. Within the hour, he was in a military command center, watching data streams that made no sense. New Seoul's signals had stopped completely. Not degraded. Not jammed. Simply gone, as if the entire colony had vanished. 3 days later, a scout ship reached New Seoul's coordinates. The pilot's report was brief and broken by sobs. Where a thriving colony once stood, there was only glass. The aliens had heated the planet's surface until everything melted. 4 million people, including 200,000 children, had been turned to ash in minutes. Before humanity could process this horror, 6 more colonies went dark. Commander Yoon Murray worked without sleep for 4 days straight. She was a tactical analyst stationed on Mars, known for finding patterns that others missed. As reports came in from the dying colonies, she mapped every attack, every timestamp, every target. What she found made her blood run cold. The aliens were not attacking randomly. They were targeting specific locations. Hospitals where pregnant women received care. Schools filled with children. Food production centers. Shipyards where new vessels were being built. The pattern was clear and terrible. They were not trying to defeat humanity. They were trying to end humanity forever. The Galactic Confederacy revealed itself on the 5th day. 12 alien species, united under one government, had watched humanity spread across the stars for 200 years. They had decided, by unanimous vote, that humans were a threat that needed to be removed. Their message to Earth was simple. Return to your home planet. Stay there. Never leave again. If you refuse, we will continue until none of you remain. Earth's United Council met in emergency session. Leaders from every nation gathered in a massive chamber, their faces showing fear, grief, and anger in equal measure. Some argued for surrender. The colonies were lost. Earth could survive if they accepted the Confederacy's terms. Others demanded immediate military action, though humanity's fleet was tiny compared to what the aliens possessed. President Kang Sumi listened to every argument. She was 62 years old, a grandmother who had spent her career working for peace. She had never wanted war. She had never imagined she would need to order one. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. She asked the council a simple question. If they surrendered, if they crawled back to Earth and waited, what then? The Confederacy had already shown what they thought of humans. They had killed millions, without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. What would stop them from finishing the job whenever they chose? The room fell silent. President Kang Sumi stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over a world that had known peace for nearly a century. She thought about her grandchildren. She thought about the children of New Seoul, who had done nothing wrong except exist. She made her decision. The next morning, she stood before cameras that would broadcast her words to every human being alive. Behind her, the flags of Earth's nations hung together. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not waver. She told humanity that their colonies had been murdered. She told them that the Confederacy wanted them to surrender and wait for death. She told them that she would not allow it. Then she said words that would echo through history. They have burned our children. They have destroyed our homes. They expect us to kneel and beg for mercy from those who showed none. They do not know us. They do not know what they have done. Today, I do not declare war. War ends. What I declare does not end until the last enemy who voted for our extinction has answered for that vote. We will find them. We will break them. We will make them understand that humanity does not surrender, humanity does not forget, and humanity does not forgive. Across Earth and the surviving colonies, people watched with tears streaming down their faces. Some cried from fear, most cried from rage. Admiral Park Doan received his orders that afternoon. He was to command the first extinction fleet, a force that did not yet exist but soon would. Every shipyard on Earth and Mars began working around the clock. Every factory converted to military production. Every scientist turned their minds to the question of how to kill aliens in her laboratory on Mars. Dr. Baek Jeong began studying the wreckage from alien attack ships that had been shot down during the massacres. She was a xenobiologist, trained to understand alien life. Now she would learn to end it, on a training base in Korea. A young soldier named Cho Hyun-woo volunteered for a new program. They needed soldiers willing to drop from orbit in armored pods, landing directly in enemy territory. The survival rate in training was less than 50%. 10,000 soldiers signed up in the first week. Commander Yoon Murray received a promotion and a new assignment. She would plan humanity's counterattack. She studied everything known about the Confederacy, learning their weaknesses, their habits, their fears. She found that they had many weaknesses. They had no fears. They had never needed any. That would change. The Confederacy watched humanity's response with amusement. These primitive creatures thought they could fight back. Their technology was centuries behind. Their population was tiny compared to the trillions of beings in the Confederacy. They would learn their place soon enough. They did not understand what they had created. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy that humans knew had been developed to kill other humans. They were very, very good at killing. Now, they had a new target, 6 months after the burning of New Seoul. The first extinction fleet launched from Earth's orbit. 200 ships, ugly and brutal, bristling with weapons that the Confederacy had never seen. At their head flew Admiral Park Doan's flagship, named after his daughter who never got to wear her wedding dress. The Soyun's vengeance turned toward the stars, and humanity went hunting. The Vorkon High Commander stood on the bridge of his battleship and laughed at the human fleet approaching his world. His species had provided the ships that burned New Seoul. They were proud of this fact. The humans were insects. The insects needed to be crushed. The Vorkan homeworld was protected by the most powerful defense grid in the Confederacy. 3,000 orbital weapons platforms surrounded the planet. 200 warships patrolled the system. The shields around their world could stop any attack. Captain Han Tae-yu studied the defenses from his position at the edge of the system. His ship, the Vengeance of New Seoul, was one of the new Extinction-class carriers. It was not pretty. Human warships were built for one purpose, and beauty was not that purpose. His orders were simple. Destroy the Vorkan shipyards. Make them pay for New Seoul. Show the galaxy what happens to those who murder. Human children. The Confederacy expected humans to fight like civilized species. Approach the enemy. Exchange fire at reasonable distances. Accept surrender when offered. Follow the rules that had governed galactic warfare for 10,000 years, Han. Taiwu had different plans. 3 cargo ships had traveled with his fleet. They were old vessels, scheduled to be scrapped. Their crews had been removed. Their engines had been modified to produce maximum acceleration at his command. The cargo ships fired their engines and aimed directly at the Vorkon homeworld. The Vorkons detected the attack, of course. They calculated the trajectory and prepared their defenses. Cargo ships were slow. They would be destroyed long before they reached the planet. Then the ships kept accelerating. The Vorkon commander realized the truth too late. The humans were not trying to land troops or deliver weapons. They were using the cargo ships as weapons. At the speeds they were reaching, each ship would hit with the force of a nuclear bomb. 1,000 nuclear bombs. The defense grid fired everything it had. They destroyed 2 of the cargo ships. The third one got through. The impact cracked the continent where the shipyard stood. The shockwave circled the planet 3 times. 800 million Vorkans died in the first minute. Billions more would die in the years that followed, as their world's climate collapsed. Han Tai-Wu watched the destruction through his ship's sensors. He felt nothing. His sister had lived on New Sol with her 3 children. They were ash now. The Vorkans had laughed while burning them. He opened a communication channel to the surviving Vorkan ships. His message was short. This is what extinction looks like. Tell your Confederacy. We are coming for all of you. News of the Vorkan attack spread through the galaxy like fire. The Confederacy had never seen anything like it. Using ships as weapons, accelerating mass to near light speed, and aiming it at a planet, it was barbaric. It was uncivilized. It was absolutely devastating. Dr. Baekjeong worked in a secret laboratory beneath the surface of Mars. She had survived the massacre on Inchin 4 colony by hiding in a basement for 3 days while aliens hunted survivors above. When rescue ships finally arrived, she was the only one left alive in her district. Now she spent every waking hour studying the enemy. The Confederacy species were advanced in many ways. Their computers were faster. Their energy weapons were more elegant. Their shields were stronger. But Jiang noticed something interesting. Their technology had not changed in thousands of years. They had found solutions that worked and never looked for better ones. Humans were different. Humans improved their weapons every year, every month, every week. In the 6 months since the war began, human engineers had already developed 3 new types of missiles, 2 new armor materials, and a targeting system that could track enemy ships through shield interference. The Confederacy was fighting with antiques. Humanity was inventing new ways to kill them every day. But Gilng's most important. Discovery was biological. The Confederacy species had evolved on stable, peaceful worlds. Their immune systems were simple. They had never faced the endless war of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that shaped life on Earth. A disease that would give a human a mild fever could kill an alien in days, Jiang reported her. Findings to Admiral Park Do-han. He read her report 3 times, his face growing darker with each reading. Then he authorized her to continue her research. Commodore Shin Yonji earned her nickname in the Battle of the Andromeda Reach. Her fleet was outnumbered 4-1. The enemy commander, a Rathani admiral with 200 years of experience, moved his ships into a perfect formation. He had fought dozens of battles. He knew every tactic. Victory was certain. Youngji ordered her ships to enter faster than light travel. The Rathani admiral was confused. Was she retreating? Running away? His sensors tracked her fleet as they vanished into hyperspace. 7 seconds later, her ships reappeared inside his formation. Faster than light travel was supposed to be safe. Ships were supposed to exit hyperspace far from any obstacles. The targeting systems had safety protocols to prevent exactly what Yunji had just done. She had removed the safety protocols. Her ships materialized between enemy vessels, sometimes within meters of their hulls. They emerged with weapons already firing. At that range, shields were useless. Armor was meaningless. The Rathani fleet died in 90 seconds. Yanji lost 1/3 of her ships. Some had exited hyperspace inside asteroids. Others had collided with enemy vessels. She considered this an acceptable trade. The surviving Rathani ships fled in terror. They had never seen anything like this. Fighting humans was like fighting ghosts. They appeared from nowhere, killed everything, and vanished on the ground. Sergeant Major Cho Hyun-woo proved equally terrifying. His division dropped from orbit in armored pods. Falling through enemy fire like metal rain, the Confederacy ground forces expected prisoners. They expected surrender. They had rules for these things. Hyun-woo's soldiers did not surrender. When their ammunition ran out, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. They fought until they died, or until every enemy was dead. The Confederacy called them animals, monsters, uncivilized beasts. Hyun-woo called them soldiers. 2 years into the war, the Confederacy's confidence had shattered. 4 of their 12 species had been effectively destroyed. Their fleets were being hunted across the galaxy. Their armies broke and ran at the sight of human drop pods, and then Dr. Beekjiang's weapon was ready. The pathogen was elegant in its simplicity. Based on a common Earth flu virus, it had been modified to target Yulkari biology. It spread through air, water, and physical contact. Symptoms did not appear for 30 days, allowing infected individuals to spread it to everyone around them. When the dying began, it could not be stopped. The Yulkari homeworld, seat of the Confederacy's ruling council, went silent in a single month. 2 billion Yulkari, including every leader who had voted for humanity's extinction, died coughing blood in their homes. Admiral Park Doan received word of the success while planning his next campaign. He sat alone in his quarters for a long time, staring at his daughter's photograph. He had become something terrible. He knew this. The galaxy would remember humanity as monsters for 10,000 years. He did not care. The aliens had voted to murder his daughter. Now they were learning the price of that vote. 7 Confederacy species remained. Park Doan began planning their end. The Rathani Emperor had ruled his species for 140 years. He had overseen their rise to dominance in the Confederacy. He had voted to exterminate humanity without a moment of hesitation. These primitive creatures from a violent little world deserved nothing but death. Now he hid in a bunker beneath his palace while human ships burned his fleet in orbit. 3 years had passed since the war began. The Rathani had once commanded the largest navy in the Confederacy. They had believed their military power was unmatched. 2,000 warships, crewed by the finest officers in the galaxy. Commodore Shin Yunji had destroyed half of them in 18 months. She was a ghost. A demon, she appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Rahani called her the Death Shadow. Their admirals refused to fight her. 3 had killed themselves rather than face her fleet. Today, the last Rahani defense force made its stand above their homeworld. Yunji brought 400 ships. They brought everything they had left. The battle lasted 6 hours. Yunji used every trick humanity had developed. Ships emerging from hyperspace inside enemy formations, missiles that split into thousands of warheads. Kinetic rounds accelerated to fractions of light speed. Electronic warfare that turned Rathani ships against each other. When the silence came, not a single Rathani warship remained. Admiral Park Doan arrived 3 days later with the occupation fleet. The Rathani Emperor sent messages begging for mercy. He offered unconditional surrender. He promised to pay any price. Park Doan did not respond to any message. He simply began landing troops. Sergeant Major Cho Hunhua led the assault on the Imperial Palace. His soldiers dropped from orbit, their armored pods screaming through the atmosphere like falling stars. The Rathani Palace Guard, elite warriors who had never known defeat, waited to defend their emperor. The battle lasted 40 minutes. Hunwoo found the emperor hiding in his bunker, surrounded by dead guards and the bodies of his own family. The ancient ruler had killed them himself rather than let them fall into human hands. The emperor looked at Hunhua with eyes full of hatred and terror. He asked one question. "What kind of monsters are you?" Hunwoo thought about his mother, who had lived on New Seoul. He thought about his little sister, who was only 12 when the fires came. He thought about the 4 million people who had been turned to glass because this creature and his Confederacy decided humans did not deserve to exist. He answered honestly. "Are what you made us?" Then he carried out his orders. Commander Yoon Murray, now Admiral Yoon, coordinated the war from her flagship. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 years. Her hair had turned gray. Her hands shook sometimes when she thought about the numbers. The war had cost humanity dearly. 12 colonies destroyed. 800 million humans dead. Entire generations knew nothing but war. Children grew up learning to fight before they learned to read. But humanity was winning. 5 Confederacy species had been effectively eliminated. The Vorkans were dying on their shattered world. The Yulkari were extinct. The Rathani were occupied. 2 others had been broken by a combination of military defeats and biological attacks. 7 species remained. 7 species that had voted to murder humanity's children, Admiral Yoon planned their destruction with cold precision. The Confederacy's surviving members had finally realized their danger. They reached out to neutral species, begging for help. The neutrals listened with growing horror. The Thelani were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for 1,000,000 years. They had remained neutral through every conflict, every war, every extinction. They believed in peace above all things. Now they watched humanity burn its way across the stars. And they felt something they had not felt in millennia: fear. Array. Colony elder named Ancient One traveled to Earth with a desperate mission. Perhaps these humans could be reasoned with. Perhaps the slaughter could be stopped before the entire Confederacy was erased from existence. President Kong Sumi agreed to meet with the Thelani. She was 70 years old now. The war had aged her terribly. She looked like a woman of 90. Worn down by endless death and impossible choices, Ancient One entered the meeting chamber with diplomatic grace. The Thelani were tall, thin beings with silver skin and eyes that seemed to hold infinite wisdom. They had negotiated peace between warring species hundreds of times. President Kong Sumi sat across from the ancient being. She did not speak first. She simply waited. Ancient One began its speech. It talked about peace. It talked about mercy. It talked about the value of life and the importance of forgiveness. The Confederacy had made a terrible mistake, yes. But continuing this war would only create more death, more suffering, more pain. The president listened without expression when Ancient One finished. She asked a simple question: where was your peace when they burned New Sol? Where was your mercy when they murdered our children? Where were you when 12 species voted to erase humanity from existence? Ancient One had no answer. President Kang Sumi stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth cities hummed with activity. Factories produced weapons around the clock. Training centers prepared soldiers for deployment. Scientists developed new ways to kill. She spoke without turning around. You want us to stop? You want us to forgive? You want us to be the civilized species that accepts peace after our enemies have burned their fill. But you do not understand. We are not fighting for victory. We are not fighting for territory. We are fighting because 12 species looked at our children and decided they should die. Every leader who made that vote must answer for it. Every world that celebrated our colonies burning must understand what they supported. We will not stop because you ask nicely. We will not stop because we are tired. We will stop when justice is complete. Ancient One asked what justice meant. The president finally turned around. Her eyes held no anger, no hatred, only exhaustion and absolute determination. Justice means that no species will ever vote to exterminate another again. Justice means that every being in this galaxy will know what happens when you murder humanity's children. Justice means that 1,000 years from now, when civilizations think about genocide, they will remember what we did, and they will choose differently. She sat back down. Now go. Tell your neutral friends what you have seen. Tell them that humanity does not want their help. We do not need their permission. We will finish what we started, and the galaxy will watch and learn. Ancient One left Earth without another word. Its report to the neutral species was brief but powerful. The humans cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be threatened. They cannot be stopped. They have become something that the galaxy has never seen before. A species that has chosen extinction over surrender. They are willing to take everyone with them. The neutrals read the report and did nothing. What could they do? Send their fleets to stop humanity? That would only add more targets to the list. The Confederacy was on its own, and humanity was coming. Dr. Baek Jeong continued her work in silence. She had created weapons that killed billions. She did not sleep well anymore. She saw the faces of the dead when she closed her eyes, but she did not stop. One night, a young assistant asked her how she lived with what she had done. Jeong thought for a long time before answering. They killed my husband on Inchin 4. They killed my daughter. They killed everyone I loved. I survived by accident, by hiding in a hole while my world burned around me. When I came out, I had two choices. I could let the grief destroy me, or I could make sure it never happened again. She turned back to her work. I chose to make sure. The assistant never asked again. Admiral Park Doan received reports from every front. 7 species remained. His fleets were positioning for the final campaigns. Soon, the Confederacy would exist only in history books and memorial stones. He should have felt satisfaction. He should have felt victory approaching. Instead, he felt empty. His daughter would never come back. No amount of alien blood would change that. He had become a monster to avenge monsters. And now he could not remember what he was fighting for anymore, but he could not stop. The dead demanded justice. The living demanded safety. And Park Doan had made a promise. He would keep it, even if it destroyed him. For years after the burning of New Sol, Admiral Yoon Murray stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the largest fleet in galactic history. 17,000 warships stretched across space, their weapons ready, their crews prepared, the final fleet. Humanity's answer to the Confederacy's genocide? 5 species remained from the original 12 that had voted for humanity's extinction. Their homeworlds lay before the final fleet like fruit waiting to be picked. One order, and trillions of beings would die. Yoon Murray had planned this moment for years. Every ship was in position. Every weapon was loaded. Every soldier knew their duty, so why did her hands shake? On Earth, President Kang Sumi sat alone in her office. She was 73 years old now. Her doctors said her heart was failing. Too much stress. Too many sleepless nights. Too many decisions that no person should ever have to make. She had ordered the deaths of billions. She had authorized weapons that erased entire species from existence. She had watched her people become the monsters that the galaxy feared, and tomorrow, she would give the order to finish it. Her aide knocked on the door. Ambassador Sayok Masuk had arrived from the peace conference. The ambassador walked into the office slowly. She was 70 years old herself, a survivor of the New Sol massacre. She had been visiting family when the attack came. She had watched her parents, her siblings, her nieces and nephews turn to ash. She understood hatred better than most. Misuk sat across from the president and delivered her report. The remaining Confederacy species had offered everything. Complete surrender. Permanent demilitarization. Reparations that would take 10,000 years to pay. They would accept human oversight of their governments. They would dismantle their fleets. They would do anything at all, to survive. President Kang Sumi listened without expression when Misuk finished. The president asked what she thought. Misuk was quiet for a long moment. She said that she had spent 4 years hating the Confederacy. She had dreamed about their destruction. She had celebrated when their worlds burned. She had told herself that they deserved everything humanity did to them. But lately, she had been thinking about something different. The beings who voted for the attack on New Sol were mostly dead. The leaders who celebrated the genocide had been killed or captured. The military forces that carried out the massacre had been destroyed. What remained were civilians, farmers, teachers, children, beings who had never voted for anything, who had never hurt anyone, who were simply born into the wrong species at the wrong time. Did they deserve to die for crimes they did not commit? President Kang Sumi did not answer. She stared at the window for a long time. Finally, she asked Misuk to leave. She needed to think. Admiral Park Doan received the call late at night. The president wanted to speak with him privately. He had not spoken to her directly in over a year. They communicated through official channels now, through orders and reports and strategic briefings. The warmth they had once shared, the mutual respect, had been buried under mountains of death. He accepted the call anyway. Kang Sumi's face appeared on his screen. She looked old, tired, broken in ways that could not be repaired. She asked him a question she had never asked before. "Do you remember why we started this war?" Park Doan was silent for a moment. "They killed our children. They murdered millions and called it justice. They tried to exterminate our species, yes, and we swore revenge. We swore extinction. Have we achieved what we set out to do? He considered the question carefully. We have destroyed 7 species. We have conquered the Confederacy. We have made the galaxy fear us. No one will ever attack humanity again. The president nodded slowly. And what does it cost us? Park Do-eun thought about the question. He thought about his daughter, who would have been 32 years old now. He thought about the young man she was going to marry, who had died fighting on the Rethany homeworld. He thought about the grandchildren he would never hold. He thought about what he had. It come to everything. It has cost us everything. The president closed her eyes. I keep thinking about the children. Not our children. Their children. The ones who never voted for anything. The ones who were born after the war started. The ones who will grow up knowing that humans murdered their parents, their grandparents, everyone they loved. Park Do-eun felt something stir in his chest. Something he had buried a long time ago. We made a promise. We swore extinction, yes we did. And we meant it. 4 years ago, I would have burned every Confederacy world without hesitation. But now I ask myself something. What? Is this who we want to be? Is this the species we want humanity to become? Killers of children. Destroyers of innocence. Monsters that the galaxy tells horror stories about for 10,000 years? Park Do-eun did not have an answer. The president continued. The beings who attacked us were evil. They committed genocide without remorse. But if we destroy what remains of them, if we kill trillions of innocent beings to punish the dead, how are we any different? We are different because they started it. Is that enough? The question hung between them like a blade. Park Do-eun thought about everything he had done. The worlds he had burned, the species he had erased, the billions of beings who had died at his command. He had told himself it was justice. He had told himself it was necessary. He had told himself that his daughter's ghost demanded nothing less. But his daughter had been a kind person. She had volunteered at hospitals. She had wanted to be a teacher. She had believed in mercy and forgiveness and second chances. Would she be proud of what her father had become? The answer came to him slowly, painfully, like a wound being cleaned. No, she would not. Admiral Yoon Murray received a priority transmission from Earth. She read it 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. Hold position. Do not attack. Wait for further orders. She contacted President Kang Soo-mi immediately. What is happening? We have them. We can end this today. We can finish what we started. The president's voice was calm. I know, but I need time to think. I need time to decide if finishing this is the right thing to do. Admiral Yoon Murray wanted to scream. 4 years of war. 4 years of blood. For years of sacrifice. And now, at the moment of final victory, the president was hesitating. But she was a soldier. She followed orders. The final fleet held position. 17,000 ships. Waiting in silence, the 5 remaining Confederacy species watched the fleet and waited for death. They had no hope left. They had seen what humans did to those who opposed them. Their extinction was simply a matter of time. Then something unexpected happened. A human transport ship approached their space. It was small, unarmed. It carried a single passenger, Ambassador. Ambassador Masuk had one final mission. She met with representatives of the 5 remaining species. They gathered on a neutral station, surrounded by bodyguards who knew they were useless. If the humans wanted them dead, they would be dead. Misuk looked at the beings before her. 4 years ago, their governments had voted to erase her species from existence. 4 years ago, they had celebrated while her family burned. She should have hated them. Part of her still did, but she remembered something her father had told her when she was young. Hatred is easy. Forgiveness is hard. But forgiveness is what separates civilized beings from monsters. She took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them what humanity demanded. The terms were harsh. Permanent disarmament. Complete oversight of their governments. Reparations that would last for centuries. Their children and grandchildren would grow up under human supervision, but they would survive. The Confederacy representatives listened in shock. They had expected death. They had expected extinction. They had expected humans to finish what they had started. They did not expect mercy. One of them asked why. After everything that had been done, why would humanity spare them? Masuk thought about the question for a long time. Because we are better than you. Because we refuse to become the monsters you tried to make us. Because our children deserve a future that is not built on genocide. She paused. And because someone has to stop the killing, someone has to choose peace. Someone has to be the first to put down their weapons. She stood up. Humanity has chosen. What will you choose? The Confederacy representatives looked at each other. They saw the same thing in each other's eyes. Hope. One by one, they agreed to the terms. The final fleet held position for 72 hours. 17,000 ships, armed with enough weapons to sterilize every remaining Confederacy world, waited in silence while the fate of trillions was decided. Admiral Park Doan stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, his daughter's ashes drifted through space. Somewhere out there. 4 million souls from New Sol waited for justice that might never come. He had promised them extinction. He had sworn to burn every world that celebrated their deaths. He had dedicated 4 years of his life to keeping that promise, and now he might break it. The order came from Earth at exactly midnight. President Kang Sumi's voice was steady as she spoke to every human ship. Every human soldier, every human being listening across the galaxy. She told them that humanity had won. The Confederacy was broken. Their fleets were destroyed. Their governments had surrendered. The species that voted for genocide would spend the next 1,000 years under human control, paying for their crimes. But they would not be exterminated. She explained her decision carefully. She talked about the difference between justice and revenge. She talked about the civilians who had never voted for anything. She talked about the children who deserved a chance to grow up, even if their ancestors had made terrible choices. She talked about what humanity had become, and what it could become. We have proven that we cannot be destroyed. We have proven that attacking our children brings destruction beyond imagination. The galaxy will remember this lesson for 10,000 years. No species will ever vote for our extinction again. They know the price, but we must also remember what we have done. We have killed billions. We have erased species from existence. We have become the monsters that our enemies feared today. We choose to stop being monsters. She paused. I know that some of you will see this as weakness. I know that some of you wanted extinction. I know that some of you will never forgive me for this decision, but I believe that our children deserve a future that is not built on endless killing. I believe that mercy is not weakness. I believe that humanity can be better than this. The final fleet will stand down. Our soldiers will come home. The war is over. May history judge us fairly. The transmission ended. Admiral Park Doan stood in silence for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. Some had tears in their eyes. Some looked angry. Some looked relieved. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the promise he made at her memorial. He thought about the person he had become in the 4 years since her death. He had killed billions. He had authorized weapons that erased entire species. He had become exactly what the Confederacy feared when they voted for humanity's extinction, and in the end, what had it accomplished? His daughter was still dead. His grandchildren would never be born. The 4 million people of New Sol were still ash drifting through space. No amount of revenge could bring them back. No amount of death could fill the emptiness in his heart. Maybe the president was right. Maybe it was time to stop. He gave the order. Stand down. Return to Earth. The war is over. One by one, the ships of the final fleet turned away from their targets. 17,000 vessels, carrying enough firepower to end civilizations, pointed their bows toward home. The galaxy watched in amazement. They had expected extinction. They had expected humanity to finish what it started. They had expected the monsters to continue their rampage. They did not expect. No. Mercy. Dr. Baek Jeong received the news in her laboratory on Mars. She sat alone for a long time. surrounded by the equipment she had used to create plagues that killed billions. Then she began destroying everything. The bioweapons, the gene sequencing data, the sample cultures, the research notes, all of it fed into incinerators or deleted from computer systems. Her assistant found her hours later, standing in an empty lab, watching the last of her work burn. The assistant asked why. Guiyang did not look away from the flames, because nobody should ever have the power to do what I did, because these weapons would eventually be used again, because I will not let my legacy be endless death. She finally turned to face her assistant. We won the war. We saved humanity. Now I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn forgiveness for how we won it. Sergeant Major Zhou Hunhua returned to Earth on a transport ship filled with soldiers who had fought across the galaxy. They were heroes. They had defended humanity from extinction. They had killed enemies without mercy and never surrendered. They were also broken. Hunwu had killed more beings than he could count. He had seen horrors that would haunt him forever. He had watched friends die in his arms and enemies beg for mercy that he did not give. The war was over. But the war inside him would never end. He stepped off the transport ship onto Korean soil. His mother was waiting for him. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with years of worry. She had lost 2 children in the New Seoul massacre. Hyunwoo was all she had left. She held him for a long time, crying quietly. Hyunwoo did not cry. He had forgotten how Admiral Yoon Murray became the first commander of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Her job was to ensure that no species ever threatened another with extinction. The irony was not lost on her. She commanded the same ships that had burned Confederacy worlds. She led the same soldiers who had killed billions. Now she used them to protect the beings they had once tried to destroy. Some of the surviving Confederacy species feared her. She understood why. She feared herself sometimes, but she did her job. She kept the peace. She made sure that the galaxy would never see another extinction war. It was not redemption. Nothing could redeem what she had done. But it was a start. Ambassador Seok Mi-suk gave her final speech before retiring from diplomatic service. She stood before representatives of every species in the galaxy, human and alien alike. She talked about the war. She talked about the choices humanity had made. She talked about mercy and justice, and the thin line between them. Then she said something that would be quoted for centuries. You saw us at our worst because you brought out our worst. You murdered our families and expected us to submit. You tried to exterminate us, and you learned what that means when your target fights back. But we are not a species of killers. We are not a species of monsters. We are a species of survivors. We will do whatever we must to protect our own. And when the threat is gone, we return to what we truly are. She paused. Builders, dreamers, healers, parents, who love their children, and friends who die for each other. Beings who make terrible choices in terrible times, but who always try to be better. She looked across the assembled species. The galaxy has seen what happens. When you threaten our children, remember that lesson. Remember what we are capable of. Remember the worlds that burned and the species that vanished. But also remember this. We did not want to become monsters. We did not enjoy what we did. We carry the weight of those deaths every day. We will carry it until we die. Push us to extinction, and we will drag you to hell with us. Offer us peace, and we will be your greatest friends. The choice has always been yours. She stepped back from the podium. Choose wisely, Admiral. Don spent his final years in a small house on the Korean coast. He tended a garden. He watched the waves. He read books about history and philosophy and the nature of war. Every year on the anniversary of the New Seoul massacre, he visited the memorial. His daughter's name was there, among 4 million others. He sat before it for hours, talking to her ghost, asking questions that had no answers. One day, a young woman approached him. She was a student, writing a paper about the war. She asked if she could interview him. He agreed. She asked many questions. About battles, about strategy, about the decisions he had made. Finally, she asked the question that everyone wanted to know. Do you regret it? Park Do-an was quiet for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we became what we became. I regret that my daughter's death turned me into someone she would not recognize. He looked at the memorial, but I do not regret protecting humanity. I do not regret showing the galaxy what happens when you murder our children. I do not regret that my grandchildren, and your grandchildren, and every human child born from now until the end of time, will grow up in a galaxy that knows it's better than to threaten us. He turned to face the young woman. We paid a terrible price for that peace. We became monsters too by safety for our descendants. I will answer for that when I die, and I will accept whatever judgment awaits me. But I would do it again. Because our children deserve to live. Because humanity deserved to survive. Because some things are worth becoming a monster for. He looked back at the memorial one final time. Remember us. Remember what we did? Remember why we did it. And make sure it never happens again. The young woman wrote everything down. 1,000 years later, the Extinction War remained the most studied conflict in galactic history. Military academies taught its battles. Philosophers debated its morality. Species told their children stories about the humans who destroyed anyone who threatened them. But they also told other stories. Stories about human doctors who healed alien diseases. Stories about human engineers who rebuilt alien cities. Stories about human diplomats who prevented wars before they started. Humanity had proven it could destroy civilizations. Then it had spent centuries proving it would rather build them. The galaxy never forgot the Extinction War. They never forgot the monsters that humans could become, but they also never forgot the choice that humans made when they had every reason to continue. Killing, they chose mercy. They chose peace. They chose to be better. And in the end, that was what made them truly terrifying. Because a species that could commit genocide and then choose to stop. A species that could destroy worlds and then heal them. A species that could become monsters and then choose to be human again. ... That species could do anything, the galaxy remembered. The galaxy learned, and no one ever threatened humanity's children again.